12 years ago this month, I did a series of 4 sermons here in the chapel about the spiritual practice of friendship. Before I share some thoughts on friendship that I've learned about and reflected on since that time, I'll give all of you who either weren't here 12 years ago or whose memories aren't as good as mine about what I said, a really brief recap of the big ideas I based those sermons on. One was the concept of the Anam Cara by John O'Donohue from his book of the same name. Anam Cara is Gaelic and means the soul friend. And he writes, in the early Celtic Church, a person who acted as a teacher, companion, or spiritual guide was called an Anam Cara. It originally referred to someone to whom you confessed, revealing the hidden intimacies of your life. With the Anam Cara, you could share your innermost self, your mind, and your heart. You were joined in an ancient and eternal way with the friend of your soul. And I also talked about the ideas of pastoral psychologist Robert J. Wicks, who in a couple of books outlined his idea that there are really 4 essential major roles friends play in our lives. And he suggested that one of these is called the cheerleader, and it's just like it sounds, the person who gives you positive reinforcement, picks you up when you're down, cheers you on, helps you get it done. The prophet, that person who's really good at telling you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear, and who's very good about calling you on your own stuff. The harasser is a friend who nags you to be your best self. They are able to keep after you in a way that doesn't turn you off, but in a way that helps you respond and engage whatever may be at hand in the best way you can from your best self. And the spiritual guide, who points the way back to your deepest beliefs and innermost values, helps you see light and find ways out of darkness, and enjoys spiritual practices in the spiritual life and discusses them with you. And I talked about a number of friends of mine who filled these roles and who seemed like soul friends. And now that you're all caught up, we can go on to some further reflections that have happened since that time. So I'm going to start off with the story of one of my friends. I met my friend Joanna, also a UU minister, in 2008 when I arrived in Texas. She was a seminarian at the time and had a partner she's married to, and she has 4 children, and I became friends with her and her family. And as a few years passed, we became closer friends. And then eventually, my ministry at the church I was at ended, and I got divorced all at the same time. And feeling about as low as you can possibly feel, I think, I got an email one day from Joanna, and the subject line said, "Grace Bomb." And I thought, grace bomb. So I opened the email, and it said, "Tony, I love you. You've been sent a grace bomb. Click here." And there was a link that opened up into a playlist of videos on Vimeo. And in each of these videos was a friend of mine telling me some variation of, "We know it's hard. I'm your friend. I'm here for you. You can make it. It's going to be okay." So as I opened up video after video and heard this in different ways over and over, as you can imagine, I broke down crying completely, probably for about an hour. There is a cheerleader and a prophet and a spiritual guide. As is the case, if we have these different roles of friendship, quite often others play more than one role for us and we play more than one for them. A couple years ago, I went to one of my happy places, which is the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in North Adams. Is anybody familiar with that place? They had a great installation a couple years ago by a photographer from Maine named Tanya Hollander, and the exhibit was called, "Are You Really My Friend?" And it came about because one night she was sitting at home and writing a letter, an actual letter with pencil and paper, like we used to do before computers and phones and social media. Yet at the same time was on social media chatting with another friend who was in Indonesia for work. And she began thinking, this social media has presented me with a lot of friends. Are they my friends? Are the people who I think are my friends my friends? So she decided to travel around the world and visit all of her Facebook friends, and then take portraits of them and the people they lived with. And so part of the exhibit was hundreds of photographs, 626 Facebook friends. It took her 3 years. The exhibit contained over 400 portraits, friends from 34 states and 12 countries on 6 continents. While doing this, she realized that some of the people she thought were her friends were not her friends and did not have hospitality to offer her. And yet at the same time, while trying to visit other friends, she met new friends and took their photograph. The exhibit also contained 5,000 images of Post-it notes. Everywhere she went, she asked people, "What is a friend? What does it mean to be a real friend?" And had them write it down on the Post-it notes. And she collected over 5,000 of these. And she transferred the images onto huge tapestries of material that hung from the ceiling. Thousands of them. Here's some of my favorites. "A real friend fills a need you can't explain." "A real friend connection requires no struggle." "Someone who is there for you anytime." "A real friend is someone you're partially in love with." "A real friend is one you can communicate to without words." "A real friend does not judge you're crazy." "A real friend will put your needs before theirs when you really need them to." "A real friend has no problem calling you on your stuff." "A real friend immediately deletes your hard drive upon your death." "A real friend is someone you can be your best and your worst with." "A real friend wakes you for the sunrise." "A real friend is somebody you can be ordinary with." "A real friend is someone who shares your passion for art." "A real friend is a friend you love for life." "A real friend will make you a steak even if they are a vegetarian." "A true friend sticks closer than one's nearest kin." Now, that's Proverbs, not Tanya Hollander. But all of her Post-its were, in a sense, Proverbs on friendship. Her exhibit points out something I think all of us know. We throw the term friend around a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean someone is our actual friend. Someone is whom we share with at an intimate level, who really knows us, and we let them see our best and our worst, and they are comfortable showing us their worst as well as their best. When we start to look at who are our real friends and not our acquaintances, we realize that that number is not the hundreds or thousands of people who are friends on our social media. It's actually much smaller. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar claims that the evolutionary size of an animal's social group is related to brain size. The bigger the brain, the larger the animal's social group. Humans, he says, can only really socially relate in any meaningful way to about 150 people at any one time, which is fascinating because at the size of about 150, congregations always have a difficult time. You're hitting the size where your congregation doesn't feel like family anymore because you can't know everybody. So I find that very interesting, being involved in church. He says 150 is our capacity, but we really only know about 5 people at the closest intimate level of relationship. Then there's another 15 people, he says, with whom we are very good friends, maybe not as close as with those 5. And then 50 is about the number of friends we claim to know relatively well. And about 150 is the extent of our social network, when we really get down to it and start marking and mapping it out. He and a research team did an experiment to check this out. So they analyzed phone data from 35 million people's cell phones in the European Union, and the 6 billion calls that those phones made. And they looked at the layers of who was called and who wasn't and how often. And they found that the phone calls on any given phone were in layers of 4, 11, 30, and 129. That every single phone had 4 numbers it called more than all the others. And then another 11 that it called more than the rest. Then another 30 that it called more than the rest. And then about 129 that were called repeatedly that weren't kind of one-offs or mistakes. Fascinating. Our friends seem to layer in levels of intimacy, from our inner circle to a slightly bigger circle, to our acquaintances, to kind of everybody we kind of know or feel we know. Having friends is not just something that's nice to have. Having friends is important not only to our spiritual life, but to our physical life and our well-being as a whole. Last May, the healthcare company Cigna released a study on loneliness based on a survey of 20,000 American adults. And about half the adults surveyed reported being lonely, and only half reported that they have a meaningful social interaction with another person each day. Take a step back on that one. Out of 20,000 people surveyed, 10,000 of them said they're lucky to have one meaningful interaction with another person each day. That's not a lot of loneliness. That's an epidemic of loneliness. The study also found interesting correlations. The older people were, the lonelier they reported being. They found that loneliness correlates to getting less sleep, less physical activity, and feeling overworked and stressed. Friendship, therefore, and the practice of friendship is not only a cure for loneliness, but a cure for very real health issues. Friendship as a practice, I believe, is both an iterative practice and a spiritual practice. And although I do believe in friendship at first sight, for the most part, friendship is an emergent, iterant practice. Adrienne Marie Brown says, emergent process is when something complex arises out of many small actions and interactions. Most friendships grow and are sustained in this way. Many smaller acts of friendliness accumulate over time and create a deep and complex relationship called friendship. Friendship is also iterative. We treat each other as friends, we care for another, and the more we engage this friendship, the closer it gets to being real, true, and deep friends that might be called soul friends. Friendship is not just something we practice, it is a spiritual practice. By spiritual practice, I mean something that we do with intentionality, regularity, depth, and consecration, something that sets it aside in our intention to make it holy, special, blessed. And this requires discipline, like any spiritual practice. It can mean staying in touch with someone because you should, spending time with another person because you should, not just because you want to. Because even being with our friends and our most intimate loved ones is something that I think we all find can feel like we don't have time for at various points and stages of our life. And friendships, I think just like marriages, go through seasons. Times of closer connection and looser connection and closer connection again. I have a friend named Kathleen I've been friends with since I was an undergraduate. That's over 30 years ago now, since we met. And we've taken turns over the years being the person who always calls, always writes, always sends a card, always sees if it's time we can get together. And I think because during our seasons of a friendship, as each of us kind of takes the lead at the discipline of being friends, we've lasted a very long time as good friends. I would definitely call her Anam Cara. Because friendship is important to our health, and because we create it and deepen it the more we practice it, we need to feed it with regular, recurring rituals. Coffee, dinner, hikes, tennis, chess, cards, phone calls, Skype visits, email, holiday cards. We can get busy. We can let that contact slide. We miss a holiday card, we don't return an email, we get sick or ill. And just as we create a friendship by its practice, we can also destroy it and slowly erase it by lack of practice. In the last couple weeks, I got an email from a friend of mine I met also when I went to Texas, and she wrote asking, did I say or do something wrong? And boy, that sat me right down in my chair. And I realized I have not reached out to this person for 4 years since I moved back to Massachusetts from Texas. And I realized that the longer that time went on, the more I was afraid to reach out, figuring that they would be mad at me. God bless her for reaching out, because we've reconnected again. Friendship needs a practice to grow and sustain, and its lack of practice will let it fade away. Because most of us only have 4 to 5 friends that are really an inner circle and know us at the level of our soul, we do need to pay attention and cultivate and keep those people who travel into that sacred space. One reason for what Cigna calls an epidemic of loneliness is the fact that the older we get, the harder it gets to make friends. We don't encounter people the way we once did while we were growing up or while we were young adults. When we were younger, each new fall would bring each new school year, which would bring new people into our lives to possibly make friends with. As we are younger and we get our first jobs and do other things and make our first social circles as young adults, we are meeting some new people and being faced with the opportunity to find new friends. And the older we get, those seem to lessen and lessen and lessen to the point where we have to intentionally go find those opportunities where we meet the people. There are video blogs on YouTube and blogs and podcasts, and even articles in the New York Times and Atlantic and other publications on how to make friends as an adult. Among the advice in all of these is usually join a group where there might be people with shared interests, take a class, sign up for a lesson, join a civic group, join a congregation of some faith, take up some activity or sport or recreational practice. Invite people to dinner. Maybe start with your neighbors. I'm a big believer that few of us in our culture know neighbors the way we once used to, and therefore they can't be friends the way they might have once been. Invite your neighbors to dinner. Pick the 4 people or households that live closest to you, invite them over for dinner on the same night. Some of you would find if you did that, you'd get a lot of readily accepted invitations, and some of you would find that no one would be interested. This friendship thing doesn't just happen. Community doesn't just happen. We must create it. Vanessa Van Edwards says, treat looking for a friend like you are looking for a partner. Let it involve courtship, flirting, dating. There are even phone apps to find not dates, but friends. Bumble BFF, Meet Me, Meet Up, Friender, Hey Vina. You can use your phone to find friends the way people do online and phone dating now. And like dating, Edwards says, it's hit and miss. Getting to know someone sometimes works out and sometimes it doesn't. Much advice about making friends begins with being able to strike up a conversation. It's hard to get to the point where you can share anything with someone until you've had some basic getting to know you conversations. So what do you talk about with someone? Well, how about Arthur Aaron's 36 questions that lead to love? Aaron and co-researchers wrote in a study they did that one key pattern associated with the development of a close relationship among peers is sustained, escalating, reciprocal personal self-disclosure. So they set up an experiment where they gave people questions to ask each other to see if the people could become friends. Mandy Len Cantron's modern love essay in the New York Times, To Fall in Love with Anyone, Do This, refers to the study Aaron did and explores whether intimacy between two strangers can be accelerated by having them ask and answer a set of specific personal questions. And so she asked a friend of hers to meet her at a pub and see if they could really become very, very close by answering these questions together, even if they could form a dating relationship. Could they fall in love? They didn't fall in love, but they did get to know each other much, much better. And she wrote an essay called 36 Questions to Fall in Love. Aaron and his researchers broke the 36 questions into 3 sets, each set intending to be more probing than the other one. Some of my favorite questions from this list include, when did you last sing to yourself? When did you last sing to someone else? If you could wake up tomorrow having gained any one quality or ability, what would it be? What is your most treasured memory? If you were to die this evening with no opportunity to communicate with anyone, what would you most regret not having told somebody? Why haven't you told them? And of course, perhaps my favorite is number 16. What do you value most in a friend?